Okay, welcome to the Building Doctor Show. Let's see, we are constantly upgrading our platforms. Type a 1 in the chat if you can see everything and see our screen. Let me know that we can see that while we're getting lined up here. 1, you can see it. Okay, good. We will get rolling. So welcome to the Building Doctor Show. I am your host, Jens Johansson. Glad to see you here to learn more about your buildings. If you're joining us on the podcast today, thanks for listening. If you'd like to watch the show for the full experience, visit our website at j2consultants.com to register for the Building Doctor Show and attend live via Zoom and get the replay. And also to submit your questions for kind of a live Q&A there. So today is a real pain. Today is a pain. Get it? Today we're talking about windows and window replacements and codes and testing. And today we have Jim Kessler, a principal here at J2 and our in-house window expert. He's joining us on the show today. Jim oversees numerous commercial, retail, apartment, and condominium repair projects. And he's our in-house expert on all things window testing and replacement. And at one point even created our very own testing lab. So Jim, welcome. What do you have to share with us? Why are you excited to be on the show?
Thank you for having me. First off, yeah, Windows, kind of the bread and butter of a lot of things that I have personally been responsible for around here. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about the ins and the outs of Windows and how they work and how they sometimes don't work and how we can help.
So while we get through the rest of this intro, we're going to conduct a quick poll. This poll allows us to tailor our show as we go through. So we like to do a quick poll, fill out a few things on the screen, and knowing our audience helps us tailor it to you as well as answering our live Q&A questions. So moving on, the disclaimers, 2 things. The show is free, so put away your credit card. We aren't selling you anything. This is all about education. We are not giving any financial, legal, or engineering advice, and I'm not a medical doctor. We're just people on the internet trying to help you run your building better and share with you what we have learned and how our customers and clients, what they did and it didn't work when it came to restoring windows and running condos and all that stuff. So we hope that it benefits you. So let's end that poll. We've got mainly Washington people in here today. We've got some board members. We've got some homeowners, and finding out about us by a variety of things. And one thing you could do is give our show a like or subscribe. It depends on where you're seeing it. And that, of course, helps the algorithm. So that poll is done. So as typical show format, we're going to dive into this. We're going to do some live Q&A at the end. And Brooke and our new producer, Carolyn, will be monitoring the chat. And Jim and I will go through the Q&A section at the end and answer all your questions. There's also going to be a raffle giveaway. I don't know what that is yet, but stick around for that. All right. So jumping into the agenda. First of all, Jim, what is a Windows favorite donut?
Good question.
Glazed. Come on. Why don't you tell a window a joke?
Because it'll break.
Because it'll crack up. All right. Enough of dad jokes here. All right. We're going to cover what is a window, the standards and codes about windows, installation guides. We're going to show you live samples. We've got some of these cool little samples. Replacement windows and their problems. So replacement windows are a big thing in our multifamily market where, people want to replace their old window, and the replacement industry is full of a wide variety of installation methods. How windows leak, some window testing to make sure we can confirm they won't leak. The difference between warranties and guarantees, who owns the windows if you're in a condominium complex, and a couple other things. Trickle vents, that doesn't sound very good when it comes to windows, but we'll talk about trickle vents and airflow and then some safety and window design. So again, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. If you have general chat comments, put them in the chat, and Brooke and Carolyn can help you with that. So this is the anatomy of a window. And we have a majority of the windows we use in wood frame multifamily have this thing called a nail fin. And that's what this is. And so this is a window nail fin. This is an actual window nail fin. This is a sample meant to sit on desks. So they've cut off the bottom. But the window nail fin attaches the window to the framing. So we put nails or screws through these holes, and that's how it attaches. And then the WRB, or the weather resistant barrier, think Tyvek and building paper and peel and stick, goes over and under and around these window fins and really ties that window into the WRB. And so I'm going to take a little pause there and ask Carolyn if she can come check my settings, because I am not seeing the camera. But Jim can take you through actual photos and show you some of these nail fins.
Let's take a look at not only what we have on the screen, but for those of you that can see me, here's a window and there's nail fins right here, all the way around the edge. So these types of windows, these vinyl windows here that I'm showing an example of, and also fiberglass, aluminum clad wood, we can talk about some of the other products. But like Gentle was talking about, these are your attachment points. And not all of the windows have nail fins. So some windows have got block framing. We can kind of talk about that and how they attach. And we can get into the weeds a little bit, the details of it. But since we're talking about the anatomy of a window, the photo on the right, Jen was discussing how the bottom of it has been removed. And that little vent that you see built in there is actually what they call a trickle vent. So we can get into some of that detail a little bit further when we talk about trickle vents, but this is a way for some fresh air makeup through a window frame. So let's do a little window anatomy. All right, for the viewing public, I'm holding just a cross section of a vinyl window. This happens to be a vinyl sliding window that is triple glazed. So it means it has 3 pieces of glass in the insulated glass unit. And operable, so I could remove some pieces. You can see here's a little cross section of a window, give you a little idea of what it looks like. This would be the interior side. This is your sill track where sometimes water collects and then it can drain out through the weep holes on the outside. The photo here on the left is a good example of an installed window with the sill track. We've got the peel and stick over the top of the fin. And then the photo on the right, for those of you that are able to see this, is actually where the glass meets up with the aluminum. So there's a little weather stripping in there. Some manufacturers use sealant, and this is the setting bead. So that's what makes the window, the actual glass, removable. So a little snap piece will come out, and you get a specialty knife in there. So when that insulated glass unit fails, you can actually replace the glass instead of replacing the whole window. So a little breakdown of windows.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. And for everybody, we're trying to figure out the camera on my Zoom. I can't see what Jim's showing you, so we're still working through that, but we'll keep going. So what Jim mentioned, what we wanted to show you here, this is what's called a weep hole that allows water to drain out of the window frame. So water is designed actually to kind of get in here and roll around and do its thing, but also to drain out. So Jim, did you talk about the various kinds of weather stripping and how maybe show them a sill or how water can get out?
Just a couple of types of weather stripping here. We have a pretty standard foam weather stripping for an operable unit. How it seals, we've got some bulb gaskets, so actual rubber gasket material in some windows. Usually those are self-sealing or ones that close against one another. And when you're looking at these window weeps, they're in what's called a wet plane as opposed to a dry plane. So water does get in around these windows, and they want to make sure there's a way for the water to get out.
Gotcha. Okay. So a couple other things. We've got double paned. So here's your two panes of glass, and there's usually a gas in between those to add some thermal resistance. And then we can even go triple pane. And I believe one of Jim's samples has a triple pane. We really want to use those for thermal and sound insulation for noise. So if the front of your building is on a busy street with lots of buses or trains, or you're next to an airport, we can do one wall with triple pane, cut down on that street noise, or we can do the whole thing in triple pane. It's usually about a 10 to 20% upgrade. And so the reason we use double pane is to prevent condensation. So the warm air condensing on the cold exterior of the glass, so that triple pane reduces the amount of condensation we get there. But it also gives us an R value. So that's an insulation value. And for perspective, your typical window has between a 2 to 5 R value for on a double pane window, where your wall in a 2x6 wall has an R19 value. So you've got 19 on your wall and 3 in your window. And so you can see that windows are a big heat loss in your overall wall system. But that's when people start talking about R value of windows, that's something to explain that. So moving on, the fin integration with the WRB. And so here we have a typical window. You can see that window nail fin, that second line there, and you can see the layers of paper or the layers of Tyvek. This bottom layer tucks under the sill flashing so the water can roll out and around. And then the tape tapes that window nail fin to the paper and kind of holds everything together and keeps wind-driven rain from blowing around the corner and getting behind the paper in essentially this hole in the wall that we have to make watertight. And so this is just kind of helping you understand the layers of the paper, which are all under your siding or cladding. All right. And then what happens when we get some poorly installed windows? Well, we'll see it most often at the lower corners. You'll see the water intrusion coming at the lower corner because it runs down the side and it rolls over the sill and it gets behind the paper. If there was a mislap there or reverse lap or things aren't properly installed, we generally see corner conditions having the worst wear and tear. But we've got an example of an aluminum frame window and a pretty much brand new aluminum framed window, and still lots of damage on these corners. And I believe we've got one more. This is in stucco. So they had stuccoed the entire jamb and sill. And remember that weep hole? They had run their stucco over the top of the weeps, blocking the weep hole, so that any water that was trying to come out of the window system was going out the weep under the stucco and just trashing the wood sheathing and wood framing of the sill here. All right, water coming through the window versus around the window. So in this photo, we're looking at the exterior of a window frame, and you can see this white. It's like, what's going on here? This is the white glazing tape that Jim was pointing to earlier, was actually pulling out. It's like this pane of glass had kind of moved around, and so we could see it. And sure enough, when we put the window under a window test, you could see the water coming through the glass, between the glass and the vinyl frame. So this is what we mean by water coming through a window versus around a window. So Jim, maybe hold up that other operable window and you could show again how there's little bits and pieces of weather stripping, whether they're rubber or felt or whatnot, but water.
Here's a big one.
Okay.
So with a bigger window, bigger framing, bigger construction, bulk gaskets, and a lot of heavy material to try and keep the water from getting in. And the way this one seats up, it goes from one bulb gasket on the inside to a bulb gasket on the exterior. Some of the windows, like what you're looking at here, use a two-sided tape, and then sometimes they will come back and hit it with some sealant and try and get that interior to seat. And in this case, Jens was talking about how water was getting through. What we found out was where the piece of tape lapped in the corner, there's actually a crease. And so it was not bonded in that corner. So when we went through a window testing procedure, putting water on the outside and a pressure differential on the inside, we were able to actually draw water through that window.
Right. So interesting piece of this, looking at this lower left photo, you can see the white tape and see how it turns the corner. So this is tape. And so the installer, it's not the window installer, but the window manufacturer installing the window, they have to take a piece of tape and either cut it or miter it. So it's two flat pieces of tape that come together and correctly touch. Or in this case, they kind of sloppily went around the corner and kept going. And so that's what made that fold and crease. Oftentimes we'll see the tape stopping short, and then you have water coming where there is no tape. And so there does need, we have to have attention to detail when we put things together. And so we'll see it at these corners oftentimes when we're leaking through the window. And if anybody's wondering, this glass pane or that double pane section of window is called an IGU, and that stands for insulated glazing unit. And so this pane of window can be pulled out from the outside and replaced, all while leaving the frame intact. And so that's what happens when you get a fogged up window pane or you can't see out of it right. The window repair guys can just replace that pane and they don't have to tear out the frame. So that's another definition for you. Okay, this presentation really isn't about block frame windows, but here's an example, and Jim can hold one up. So a block frame window basically refers to no fin. And so they're fine. We use them in concrete and steel buildings, but they require different flashing techniques. But this is also the replacement industry norm. And so what they do is they cut off that nail fin, pull out the old window by collapsing it and breaking it and kind of rip it out, and then slide the new window in place and try to caulk it or spray foam it or whatever around that gap and not touch your siding. So that's basically the understanding of what the replacement industry does. They cut off the fin, making it a block frame window, and slide it into the opening. Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's a good point that there are several instances where you use a squared window and a square opening where it doesn't have a nail fin. And a lot of times masonry buildings, concrete buildings, buildings where you can't pull components of the building envelope apart, the detail that's necessary to do that window replacement appropriately where it still prevents water and air from getting through. It's just, that's the key part.
Yeah.
Want to make sure that those details are well adhered to because you want to keep the home safe.
And so masonry meaning CMU or concrete masonry unit, the big block that you build schools out of. Brick can go both ways. Brick is usually a veneer over a wood frame or steel frame building. So there's wood framing underneath that we can put a fin on, put some weather resistant barrier. There's usually a gap and we can get our brick on. Some of the older brick was structural brick or double wythe, W-Y-T-H-E, wythe brick, and that was a brick enclosure like a concrete opening. But how much of the time do we see replacement windows fail on a percentage level? What's your opinion, Jim?
I would say north of 50%.
I was saying 95%. So
Yeah.
it's just nearly impossible to caulk it in place and have that caulk last anytime. So we'll be getting to that. All right, standards and codes. There's a whole bunch of standards: AAMA, AAMA, and ASTM. Those are the big window standards. There's also building code, but the building code is a performance standard, which means keep the water out. So if the water gets in, it's failed its code standard. So it's kind of this funny performance standard in the sense of if it's failing, it's not code compliant. But the building code just refers you to manufacturers, AAMA, and ASTM standards. And then you've got the design professional like J2 and their standards. And so when we're designing a project for you to not leak, our E&O insurance is on the line. And so we are going to give you a robust installation that won't leak. So anything in this paper, tape, membrane, sealants, but how you lap it all together is the secret sauce. And so here's some of the AAMA guidelines. You can see the standards have about 3 steps. So it's pretty, here's the framed opening, here's the sill flashing, here's the sealants, the window, put some sealant on the back of that fin. Fin's very important. And then we paper it in and adhere it. So kind of 3 general standards. Design professionals like us, we've got 11, and we talk specifically about corners and interior air dams and shims across the base to support the window. We want a little bit of gap on the bottom of the window so that if any water were to leak through the window frame, it could also leak out on top of the WRB and run down the wall. We're also going to show you proper sequencing for head flashings and sloping of those head flashings and kickouts and end dams and all those sorts of things. So a few more details to help the installers really understand what we're looking for is oftentimes helpful. And, here's us preparing the window opening. You've got your interior stop or your interior air bead with some sealant. You've got the rough opening fully wrapped with self-adhered membrane. You got your window now set in, and then you're tying your pieces together with tape and WRB and things like that. And we're double checking to make sure they use the right thickness of tape, etc. Anything to add to that, Jim?
I think just from a high level, AAMA has got multiple different installation methods that a lot of manufacturers say, let's refer to AAMA 2400 for installation procedures. Whereas other manufacturers say, we want you to install it this way. The AAMA standards kind of leave a little bit subjective out there because they have to cover a lot of different window types and window wall types and installation standards. So when we came up with this, call it the design standard, we put it in the lab and we tested it. We want to make sure it worked. And we want to make sure that it was robust. So you're looking at some of our details here, which is a little bit more than the AAMA standard. But we want to make sure that we're responsible for that rough opening in that window install.
And let's talk a little bit about the AAMA standard is a manufacturer's, so all the window manufacturers got together and they created a standard, but they also made it voluntary. And so they can say, we refer to that, but we're not gonna participate in it. So it's a voluntary standard for the manufacturers to be compliant with. So it's a little confusing there. But when we get into window testing, we're testing wind speed and wind pressure, or how much we can run the test scenario. That's governed by the ASTM. That says you can't just be cowboys and do whatever you want. They have rating levels for the windows. You know, the cheap ones are rated at a lower level. The more expensive ones you can buy up. You know, you can pay more for better windows. And so it's not exactly applicable, but I kind of say window testing is kind of like mile per hour in car testing. If I'm selling you a 50-mile-an-hour car, don't drive at 60 miles an hour because that might be dangerous. But if I'm selling you a 100-mile-an-hour car, I would expect that you could drive 50 miles an hour just fine. And so there's these thresholds or standards, and again, price. And again, when we see a lot of multifamily buildings built inexpensively or low bid wins, we see cheap grade windows, and then there's a wonder why they leak. So
What you're referring to is performance grade design pressure ratings for windows. And so window manufacturers are supposed to have a gold label. So the gold label sticker is part of the AAMA 101 program, Hallmark program, if you will, that says we're going to be putting a window in this type of a building. And some local codes have started to say you must have a gold label sticker. The gold label sticker is usually found on the inside of a window. Sometimes the operable portions, you're going to find it hidden behind either a horizontal slider or a casement. It could be within that closure area. And it means that they participated in the program. They got tested to a design pressure rating. So we know that they meet at least a minimum standard of care. And that's how we start looking at window replacements and window design pressure ratings in buildings to try and determine the right product for a building.
right. Okay. Here are some window installation issues, and I think there's a couple of videos on it. But here we have a replacement window, and we've got some incompatible products. You can see over here we've got some red fluid applied, who knows what, and we've got some black asphaltic building paper. And these two products aren't getting along. They're actually melting each other. And so we get this black drip from the asphalt building paper. We get the asphalt tannins, if you will, or the asphalt dripping out onto the siding because we have incompatible products. So this refers to your asphalt building paper and your vinyl window frame. Vinyl and asphalt don't get along. Sometimes your various peel and sticks or your self-adhered flashings are more of a roofing product, not a window product. So when they come into contact with the PVC, they don't get along. Using the wrong sealants, there's just a whole host of sealant types and the right sealant for the right job. So incompatible products cause issues. But then when we get our replacement window here, you can see we don't have a nail fin. And you can also see an overcut in the substrate, in the plywood. So when they were taking the window out, they wanted to get to that nail flange. So they took their saw, set it 1.5 inches down and cut across, but their saw went too deep. So their saw not only cut the building paper, but it also cut the plywood in some cases pretty deep. And that's where all your nails are. So now I have a joint in the structural panel, not nailed to the sill framing. So that's another issue. But so they've really done a lot of damage here, cutting the old window out. And they slide the new window in. They don't have any drainage or sill support. It's too tight in the opening, so it starts bowing. They've jammed it in the opening. They didn't put in spray foam or sealant consistently. Sometimes they're not plumb level and square, so they're not working. The weather stripping is designed to work on a plumb level and square, not a trapezoid. And so all these things are going on in this replacement window. All right, a few extra window things that we're talking about. We've got a fiberglass window frame up in the upper right-hand corner. We've got an aluminum window frame in the lower left-hand corner and a vinyl window frame that you've seen before in the lower right corner. One important thing to note about the benefit of both vinyl and fiberglass windows is they can heat weld these corners. So if you think about two pieces of plastic and they warm it up with an iron and they press it together while it's still hot and wet, and it actually welds the product together. We don't have that technology, or didn't have that technology, with the old aluminum windows. So they were cut on a miter, set together, had some frame screws to screw them together, but then we relied on sealant to seal up that gap in the fin as well as in the frame of the window. So Jim, if you'll hold up another window sill, and what we're referring to is that joint at the bottom. So if any water again gets into that sill track, it now has an easy route to go right down this unsealed or failed sealant joint into the wall cavity. And so that's what we'll see in aluminum windows. So, but go ahead.
I guess it's a little hard to see since this is a dual colored vinyl window, but he's referring to the weld right here in the corner that is continuous all the way through the fin and then back to the other side.
So sealants have a 20 to 30-year lifespan. The aluminum frame of the window isn't going anywhere. It's aluminum. It'll corrode and it'll look junky, but the sealant and the rubber gaskets and the felt and all that stuff has a certain lifespan. And so you just kind of have to think about, if I've got old aluminum windows, I know those sealant corner welded joints aren't holding anymore. Okay, now this is a real one here. So this is a stucco sided building. That's their stucco cladding. And they paid a contractor to put in replacement windows. And the contractor left the fins on. And the contractor put the fins on the outside of the stucco. Remember, the fins are supposed to be nailed to the framing, and then the WRB, then the cladding, in this case stucco. So that's why they look like they're sticking way out of the window. And they did a nice job. They tried to put some trim on these windows and cover the tape and ugly sealant. But wow, these windows started leaking immediately. The board was scratching their head saying, these are brand new windows. Why is it leaking? So even licensed contractors can put this on backwards. The fins have to go under the clad. And so here's some luscious close-ups. You can see the photo on the right. That nail fin is right there. It was cut off, and they just take a razor knife or a Sawzall and just whack it off. And so this creates this gap between your framed opening and where the building paper used to be. And so remember, in that previous photo, the building paper was cut 1.5 inches back because they had to get to the nail fin. So this whole area, and here's another project where you can just see the water is getting in. There's no nail fin. They tried to put some tape on this one. They put some tape up to the edge and did their best and caulked the rest. And it just still, water is just pouring out. So here's the paper faced exterior gyp sheathing. It's covered in black water damage and mold. Here is your gyp sheathing without the paper facing, meaning it's delaminating. You can see here, it's torn off. And so this gyp sheathing is your fire resistant layer. And when it starts delaminating and crumbling and turning back to mush, you've lost your fire resistivity on your exterior of your building. And so back to the right photo, there's no sealant or spray foam in there. So they just slapped the window in, squirted some caulk around it, and their warranty lasted as long as you could see their taillights. But you can see a lot of damage was a result of that. Let's see. Here's some more window replacement. Again, that's back to that That's back to that photo of where you can see the saw mark going around it. I've got a little bit of yellow spray foam kind of squirted in where it was convenient, but totally missing all the way across the top of the window. You can see my little spatulas inserted there. You can see where the window nail fin was cut off. I can insert my painter's tool all the way to the interior drywall. And and this person was very proud of their windows. I just had these replaced. I just spent 10 grand on window replacements. Why do I have to replace them? It's like, I hate to tell you this, but the water will run down the sheathing or run down the building paper, hit the top of the window header, and just roll right in through this 3/4 inch gap. And so this is pretty consistent across that.
And we see a lot of these as worst case scenarios. So showing some of the things that we do discover, but it can absolutely be done if it's done right. There just needs to be some steps and some detailing, and you need to make sure that you're tied into the weather resistant barrier in some way, or tied into the building weatherization in some way to direct water away from the building. And in all of these examples we've shown you, that wasn't done. So it can be done. It just, there are some steps that need to be taken to make sure it's done right.
Yep. And one thing we often see is we've got a framed opening. The old window, let's pick some numbers, was a 2x3 window. So that means it's a 24-inch by 36-inch window fitting in a 24-inch by 36 hole. And so some, easy replacement guys will say, hey, wait a minute. If it's 24 by 36, I don't want to have to force it. So make it 23 by 35 and all centered in the opening. It'll be really easy on me to slide this thing in and screw it in and I'm done. Well, now we have a big gap around all of our window, bigger than it needs to be. And so that's another thing we'll see. And here is the video. Yeah, make your popcorn. This is a video. I'll turn it on and we will watch a video. Hi guys, we get this question all the time. Why can't I have somebody just install a retrofit window? Here's why. So we're gonna pull the trim off and show you the first thing. First thing is you likely had an aluminum frame window in here. They wanted to cut the window fin out. You can see where the old window fin nails are securing the window in. So they took their blade, put a mark, set it 1.5 inches out, cut through. What they ended up doing was cutting a weather-resistant paper, weather-resistant barrier. This is your building paper, this is your building's raincoat. Cutting the plywood, they set their saw too deep. So they damaged this, then put a window in the opening. It has to be smaller there's never any sealant, there's never any foam, whatever you want to call it, all the way around the window. So the window leaks, and then to top it off, here's the best part. They take their finger and smear the caulk on. You can see the sealant line going over the weep. This is how your window drains. The water gets into this track and runs out. Here's how the window drains as well. This weep is plugged. So the window itself isn't working. It's not installed correctly. The building paper has been cut off. Now any kind of water that gets through this joint goes right in behind the building paper, runs all the way down the wall, and you just created a mess. Be careful about retrofit windows. Okay, and I think there's one more. Here's another window, replacement window that we were talking about. You can see the failed sealant. And you can see the blister in the paint right under the trim because it's collecting water and allowing water to just flow right down behind. At least on this one, they didn't block the weeps.
Here's the alternative wide flange window or stucco flange window, where the vinyl frame sticks out and is designed to go out and over your cladding, either stucco or wood, and he's caulked to the cladding. The problem with this is that the sealant fails. So now, if this is on the exterior face, any water running down the wall goes right inside. So it's sold as a piece to cover stucco and siding, and you caulk it in place. So then the caulk fails, and now it turns into a funnel to direct the water back in.
Jim, what do you call that frame?
Jump frame or stucco frame window. I believe they call them jump frames.
Jump frame.
Yeah, I think every manufacturer has a little bit of a different name, but it's like a L piece of the vinyl that jumps outside of the cladding.
So in that instance, remember the cover stuck out. And so that was really for stucco, where I would cut right down that old line, put in the new window, put a big beaded sealant all over it, make it as messy as possible. And then I'd put on that cover. I would adhere that cover to cover the sloppy sealant bead and cut line. And so again, it's all sealant dependent. And after about 3 years, it just starts peeling apart. So here's another glorious example of the window installed on the outside of the stucco. I've looked at thousands of windows, and this was a first for me. So it's like, oof, come on, guys, you can do better. Okay, not a good thing we hear. It's like, I don't see any leaks in my unit. And unfortunately, here we've pulled off the interior drywall. Unfortunately, it takes a while for that water to come through your 2x4 wall cavity or 2x6 wall cavity that's full of insulation and all this stuff. So it takes a while for that water to penetrate, get into the flooring, soak the flooring, get all soft and spongy. And so just because you don't see wet carpet doesn't mean you don't have water damage around the corners of your windows. As you can see, we're looking at the back side of the exterior gyp or back side of the exterior sheathing. And not only is that damaged on the outside, like some of these photos we just showed you, on the inside, it starts getting a little, this is an outlet, and the back of that wire comes through the outlet. That outlet isn't sealed. Your air quality starts to be a concern when you start breathing this stuff, and it smells like rotten sill plate in your bedroom, and why does my room smell wet and musty?
And these things, those are
Go
hard to
ahead.
find.
What's that?
Those are hard to find.
They are.
Sometimes you don't
Yeah.
you don't know what's on the inside. By the time you do, to your point, by the time you see it on the inside, how much effect has already happened in that wall?
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of times we're out just doing a visual to look at walls and windows and trying to train the eye. What are you looking for? I'm going to look at sealant. I'm going to look at the installation, how it was installed. Can I identify any of those sequences walking inside and outside of somebody's home? And then is there a potential for risk? Do we need to do something additional? And in this case, the homeowner found it.
Yeah. And this is a good little giveaway, the stained carpet. And so some piece of furniture, maybe with metal, tacks in the bottom of the thing to help you slide it around the room, was sitting in the wet carpet for a while. And now we've got rust on the carpet. Why do I have stains on my carpet? That's weird. So this is what's going on in your wall cavity. I mean, the sill framing is shot, and the exterior gyp is nasty. So, okay, Jim, tell us about window testing. Here's a picture of a spray rack. This is how we spray the water and simulate wind-driven rain. But walk us through this.
So window testing is the application of water at a prescribed rate on the outside. And in our case, when we do it, we induce a negative pressure on the window. So that is simulating wind-driven rain. So based on the negative pressure we exhibit on the window with the water on the outside, we are now testing to the manufacturer standard. So all of these windows have got design pressure ratings and performance grade ratings. So we are only trying to do that. Now, you can put water out there and go get a big turbojet engine and you can test that way. And that's actually how it started, was with the it's like an old Pratt and Whitney propeller motor. We're going to spin this thing up, we're going to put water in there, and we're going to blow it at the window. We cannot all go by Pratt and Whitney airplane motors, so there are other methods to it. The reason we do this is to ensure a couple of things. One, that the window product itself meets the manufacturer's standards and requirements. So they say this will pass this rate of testing, so we're going to go double check. Two, we're checking the window installation. So the window installation itself, as our design, is our design professional, that we want to make sure that the window is meeting or exceeding, the window installation is meeting or exceeding the requirements for our project. We have tested hundreds and hundreds, and dare I say thousands of windows, in the western half of the United States, wherever we can drag our stuff to go test it. 25% of the windows coming from the manufacturer fail, brand new windows. So trying to diagnose that and help people solve some problems, that's why we do this.
So that's what he's referring to is we'll test existing windows in place to try to determine, is this an install failure or a window failure? But what he's saying, 25% of the windows off the truck when we're doing a new repair job, here comes the first order of windows. We take them right off the truck and put them in a buck and test them real fast and just say, did we get what we paid for? Yes, good. Okay, next. And we do a little sampling size of that and just spot check them because we found such a high percentage of failures. So, and if they fail, the manufacturer comes out and tries to make some quick repairs. Maybe it's just a simple thing like we talked about, that tape being folded or, human error. Okay, there it is. It's obvious. I'll fix it. Test it again. Yep. Thumbs up. Let's go. Sometimes the contractors need to replace them. And then the contractors go back to the manufacturer and say, hey, you gave what I thought was a brand new window. I put it in and cited it and then it failed. So anyway, this is required by Washington law if your project is big enough, not big enough, but big enough. And sometimes it may be contractually required, but check your state statute and check the contract language. And we would, we're really recommending it and encouraging it for developers to say, prove to the buyers that you've gone through this process and that you've tested windows and they're good and we're all happy. And so it's just a little bit of a preventive test. The costs of testing, I think we can, a day's worth of testing is kind of in that $4,000 ballpark by the time we do some windows. Now in place windows, that's 3 or 4 windows off coming from the truck to the buck. And it's probably 6 windows. And so you can kind of get a flavor for if it's $3,000 and I can do 4, or if it's $4,000 and I can do 4, that's about $1,000 a window to test. And so for a sampling size, that may be great, but we'll talk about it later when people say, wait a minute, I just replaced my windows. Do I have to replace them again? Well, you can test them. It's about $1,000 a window, or you can buy a new window for about $350, $400. And so oftentimes the testing and the configuring and all that stuff is more expensive than just replacing the window on a broad scale. So on a complete complex scale, it's easier or it's more cost effective to replace them. Anything else, Jim? As far as leaks through and around, we isolate. We can plasticate and tape off the WRB, so we're just focused on the window, and vice versa. We can tape off all the window and make sure it's not gaskets and things. Make sure it's installed that we're testing.
Yeah, typically going out to a property, we're going to identify first if we're there for the window product or the window install or both, because there are different methods for this. And it's as simple as plasticating off the window and isolating it from the installation. So we're only putting water and pressure on an install versus a product. A lot of the existing windows that we go to test in situ or in the wall, we're going to isolate the wall from the window product itself, because the window installation at a given time may not have been to meet all of the codes and the air barriers and energy codes and everything else. So I don't want to have a false negative where we just get water through an install and then we have to wait a couple hours for everything to dry to test a product. So yeah, understanding what we're doing ahead of time is very important.
Yep. Okay. And we can do this testing on doors, on sliding glass doors, on skylights, on curtain walls, on entry systems, on all sorts of stuff. So we can do a variety of water testing for you. And then in a claim situation, sometimes you'll have two parties. So typically the framer installs the windows and then the sider puts on the WRB. And so if you're defending one or the other, kind of helping or prosecuting, either one, help understand who screwed up and allocate accordingly. Okay, warranties and guarantees. Let me take you to law school here just quickly. According to the Black's Law Dictionary, it defines these couple things. A warranty, think about it, is a promise for a particular statement of fact, meaning this window has a warranty. The guarantee is an undertaking that promise will bind to the performance of an event, meaning the window itself has a 20-year warranty, but the installer is giving a guarantee that it won't leak for X number of years. And if it does leak, do they pay for the damage that it caused? So again, with product manufacturing, some types of products like roofing, especially, they have an NDL, a no damage limitation clause. So they're actually giving a warranty on the membrane of the roof, but a guarantee that they will fix the damage if their membrane leaks. And so that's just kind of helping us understand warranty versus guarantee. In that second bullet, it's usually the contractor or the installer has that warranty transferring to guarantee. So because we get all this language about my windows have a 20-year warranty, why are they, my windows have a lifetime guarantee, why are they having a problem? So warranty, we get into some other little fine print of, is it transferable to original or from original purchaser? Is the fix just the window? Here you go. Here's a new $200 window. It's your problem to install it. Oh, the damage? Yeah, that's not covered in the warranty. Do they reinstall that new window? Then we'll get into kind of fine print from a manufacturer that starts with this. There's no warranty or guarantee if it's used in a multifamily or condominium project. And, what do we mean by that? Wait a minute. My installer knew this was a condo and he put these windows in here, and now I don't have any kind of warranty or lifetime guarantee because it was installed in a condominium project. Lifetime of who and how long, and of who is original purchaser, the lifetime of the length or the time frame that they actually live there or own the unit. So here's the problem. The original purchaser was the developer. The developer bought those windows from brand X. They're the original purchaser. They're the one with the lifetime warranty. Then they sold the unit to you as the resident. You don't have that guarantee, or that guarantee is not transferable to you. Let's take another situation. The flipper in the, this latest 5 years of, hey, the flipper bought new windows, and when he finished his flip, sold the place. So that warranty lasted as long as the flipper owned it. Or the resident who, hey, my windows look old and tired. I'm told I have to replace my windows. I'm going to sell anyway. It'll sell for more dollar if I put in new windows. They put in new windows and sell their unit. Well, that warranty stayed with the original purchaser. So anyway, understand, read your fine print. Don't get locked into the excitement of I've got a lifetime guarantee when you don't. And so, understanding third bullet, installation, understanding, is it a manufacturer slash installer? So some of these programs out there for replacement windows are basically white labeled windows. They're not built by that company. They're built by a big name and then sold as that company's name. And so you can ask the manufacturer, hey, give me some names of approved installation contractors that can do this. Is that covering that, Jim?
So just a quick story on limited lifetime warranty. So it is the year 2024 now. So 7 years ago, bought a home, and it was a new home, and it had new windows. And then we all went through this thing called COVID, where we had to work from home. And so one of the days I was sitting in my wife's office and I was working, and I looked outside the window and I noticed my window was broken. Not the glass, but the vinyl frame. Vinyl frame had a crack in it. So original purchaser was probably the builder, but since I was the first owner outside of the builder, when I called the manufacturer, they said, sure, it's under warranty. Here is your original purchase order. Surprised they still had it. So they sent me a window.
Just in the mail? Just came Amazon or what?
Yeah, UPS showed up one day and I had a new window. So now it's on me to go replace my window that's broken because the frame is broken. And being in the line of work that I'm in, I knew I didn't want to leave a broken frame in my wall for too long. So while they stood behind their product for a period of time, there was no labor to do any sort of replacement work. So I did find some window manufacturers, window installers that we work with. And I said, will you please do this at my house? Because it was very important to do. And, one thing down with the installation, there's a lot of manufacturers that say, hey, if you use our installation guidelines, we're going to give you an installation warranty. But if the contractor is not trained in those installation guidelines and they don't have some sort of a little card like this says that they went through a class somewhere, there really isn't a guarantee on that installation because the manufacturer is not going to stand behind it. So read the fine print because, yes, there are some transferable warranties. Limited lifetime is a very interesting period of terminology. And then what is covered? Frames are covered at a different rate than glass. So you do have some glass coverage. So if the seal pops and there's condensation inside, manufacturers will send you some new pieces of glass. And then you'll be like me with my one piece of glass that had popped. They said, okay, here's some butyl tape and a piece of glass. Go replace your window. So,
okay. Yep. Okay. All right. I noticed we're getting long. I told you this was a meaty episode, so we're going to keep moving. But why did the window go see a doctor? It was in pain. Are you painfully eager to get started? Get in touch with Jim today and let's clear things up about your windows. Jim can be reached at jimk@j2consultants.com. There he is. All right. Ownership issues. I'm going to go a little faster. But what we have to talk about is maintenance, sealants, replacing glass versus the frame, color and type issues. I think mismatched quilt. And then a quote from Amy, who was turning on a past guest of the Building Doctor show. She said, I always thought it was risky to permit owners to replace windows because it does impact the building in so many ways that can be very negative. And so maybe controlling that would be better to do the repair on that. So, all right, ownership issues. I've got a stack of windows with 3 different types of frames in them. On the left photo, And on the right photo, yeah, I keep going back to this job that had fins stuck on the outside. I just want to show you how the wood trim, after he put on the wood trim to cover the tape, really made it look better. But yeah, bad install. Here's the left photo. I've got 4 different window types in these 2 buildings. They're part of the same complex because the HOA directed the residents, if you want new windows, go get them yourself. And in the right photo, I've got 3 or 4 different types. I've got aluminum, I've got white vinyl, I've got almond vinyl. So now the exterior of my uniform complex starts looking like a patchwork quilt. Oftentimes, window replacement going from aluminum to vinyl earns you an energy rebate with the local PUD. So here's an example of aluminum windows, and we were doing a strip and reclad, so we're putting in new windows. Here's the after, looks marvelous. They got a check for $134,000, and that was just a free bonus check. They're for doing the energy rebate, their energy costs went way down, and obviously they got better looking windows. So don't underestimate that. We can help you through those laborious questionnaires. After you do 10 or 12 of them, you figure out your way through them. Okay, trickle vents. So it's a window issue, and it's not a window issue. It's interior and exterior air exchange. If you keep breathing the same interior air, it gets stagnant. The code gives us guidelines, and the whole house fans do this for us. That's that fan that turns on in the middle of the night, typically in your bathroom. It's moving air. It's sucking air through the building. But where does this makeup air come from? We want it to come from the exterior because that's supposedly clean air instead of your stale interior air. So the trickle vents, they're literally, the first gen was literally a hole through the window frame that had this fancy louver and little grill on the outside of it. Here's a picture of that's on the side of a window, so that's a better one. But it's literally a hole through the frame. You would hold your hand up against it and feel the wind blow. And they had these little slidable covers that you could latch them down. Guess what? Everybody would latch them down because their windows are drafty. And so then they wouldn't get fresh air exchange. So then the version 2 would put them on the side for an intake and an exhaust or whatever on the other side. Because remember those earlier pictures of that hollow frame, the air would flow through and it wouldn't just blow straight through into your face. It would have to kind of twist and turn and you wouldn't feel the draft, but it would allow interior airflow. And so this is important for exterior fresh air exchange. But window manufacturers were tired of getting blamed because trickle vents would trickle. They would leak water right through the window. And they'd be like, I'm required to put these in per code. So actually, they just started saying, we're not offering them anymore. Your air exchange is part of your mechanical airflow ventilation. Deal with it there. We're going to give you a solid window. Is that consistent with the latest trickle code stuff, Jim?
So the way things are written right now, yes, it's become part of the mechanical code as opposed to being something that needs to be put into the windows. The only thing that we have seen in the different areas we serve is some of the municipalities saying if it has trickle vents now, we want trickle vents for your replacement windows. And the second generation, third generation, whatever generation we're on with trickle vents are better than the initial ones because at least it's not just a hole cut straight through the frame to allow the airflow. So they perform better now.
Yeah. Okay. Leakers and non-leakers. That's what we call them. Okay. Safety and window design. A few things to be thinking about. I've got 4 bullets here. The first is tempered. So that's safety glass breaks into bits versus shards. It's usually tougher to break. It's required in, these bullet points, mainly around doors or wet locations, running and slipping, swinging, sliding, operable, fixed. They'll have little stickers in the window or maybe even a little engraving on the glass. And so extra large windows, 9 square feet or bigger, think about if a big pane were to fall out, would that kill somebody because it's all shardy and sharp, or would it just, break into little bits and pieces? So tempered glass. Security glass, that's something different. It's usually laminated with plastic film between the layers, and it's, you can bang on it, try to break it and do all that stuff. And it, it's more for a security piece. But there's times where you'd want security windows. And then we get into fire. That's kind of its own little ballpark. It's got a different reinforced frame. We can't have a vinyl frame because it'll just melt, right? Plastic will melt. We've got a different kind of glass. It usually has some wire in it as part of the reinforcing. These fire windows are usually specified in designated escape routes or emergency egress paths to evacuate a building based on building type. So you can get lost in the code in the sense of movie theaters that got to get a lot of people out. These two doors, they have designated routes, whereas a multifamily may have a bunch of exterior doors, maybe a walkway, maybe a stairwell that they have to deal with. It's determined by the building official. The code gives us guidance there, but I'll tell you a couple other little stories. And then you can have automated electronic roll down shutter, kind of lock down like a bank or a jewelry store. You can have different ways to address your fire windows. And then limiters. Limiters are preventing you from opening the window to basically keep kids from falling out of high windows. We've got some building codes there. The little limiters always bust off, the cheap ones that pop up and you run the window too hard and you'll break it. I think Jim has one of those window examples with a limiter built in.
Yeah.
What's that?
I do. You want me to show it or you want to keep rolling?
You can show it. I can talk about fire windows while you're showing it. The back to the designated areas, what we start with is our architect will review it and decipher all the code, but it's really building official determined, and some building officials punt to the fire marshal, who sits in the same building usually. And they want to do things, either per code, per what their city does, or per what their experience wants. And so we've had situations where the fire marshal just says, I know it's not necessary, but I just saw this identical problem in an identical building down the block and somebody got hurt, so I'm making you put in fire windows. And it's like, oh, okay. So we've just, or the building department will review the plan intake and not make any comment. And then all of a sudden something comes back from another department that says, tough, put in fire windows. So these are a little bit different, but there is code to guide us. But what I'm saying is it's ultimately determined by the building official or the fire marshal. So it's just a more expensive window. All right. Need an inspection? Any of this stuff sound good? Give me a call. I can be reached at learn.j2consultants.com. Consultants on call. All right, let's jump into Q&A. We've got a couple of questions that pertain to Windows that were submitted earlier in the month, but get your questions into the Q&A and we will get to them. So number one question we hear, and it's tough. Hey, when we're talking to the association of, hey, we found a bunch of damage, you got to replace your siding. While your siding's off, you might want to replace your windows. And one of the number one questions we hear, hey, I just spent 15 grand replacing my windows. Can my windows be saved? So we get into kind of a matrix of questions. We say, are they installed correctly? So if I can look at them quickly and go, there's no fin, they're crooked, there's no sealant, this is junk, they're coming out. Well, there is a fin. They were done right. The siding was pulled off when my windows were replaced, and I had to do all that correctly. So the windows are installed correctly. Yes. Number two, will they match? And how important is uniformity to the HOA? And so I just spent $15,000 putting in these black framed windows, and the rest of the board or aesthetic committee or the neighborhood aesthetic department says no black windows, you have to have white vinyl, or you have to have wood, or you have to have this, or have to have that. Or just, can we even match what you have there? You have a fancy window. I agree it would have cost you $20,000, but it's so fancy, nobody can match it. And so we're going to have one unit with different windows. And then we can test them. Okay, great. Who's paying for the testing at $1,000 a window? Are there instances where we've saved windows in the past? Yes. And we've gone through each one of these. And so that's just how it kind of gets determined. So that's something to work with your board on. But this is the matrix that we think about. Jim, anything to add to that?
No, there's times that we do replace them, and it's really a risk analysis. And then in each per unit analysis, what are we dealing with? Can we reuse it? Is it in the best interest of the building as a whole to try and reuse something? Because a lot of these windows are fastened through the jambs. So there's a bunch of holes punched into the frames. So it's understanding the pros and the cons of it and putting that out there, and then we review it together.
Yep. Okay, next question. How long will the windows be? Oops, I was reading ahead. Who should be responsible? The HOA or the owner for replacement windows or putting in new windows? And then kind of that second question, who is at fault? So I think that's who's at fault if their replaced windows leak. And so who should be responsible for the windows? Well, either one. I mean, it depends on your documents, what your documents say. 90% of the governing documents, I don't know if it's in bylaws or CCNRs or whatever, your manager and HOA attorney will be able to tell you that. But they usually have some context about the owner is responsible for the glass, or the owner is responsible for the windows even. And what that primarily refers to is the broken window pane that their kid was playing ball and busted the window, or the fogged up window pane that they can't see out of it anymore. Owners are responsible for their windows, meaning if they're broken. Now, are they responsible for the frame that's under the siding, nailed to the framing, integrated with all this stuff? And so that's where if your documents are silent or if they're ambiguous, that's where I would hire an attorney, an HOA attorney, to give you an opinion letter for about $1,200. They can read all of your documents and say, you know what? The intent of your documents, a window is probably a common element or not. And then some documents we're seeing are the owners are responsible, but the association is responsible for doing the work and giving them the bill. So that's the same, ultimately, they're paying for it, whether you're being assessed to replace windows or you're just doing one set of units, but you're still paying the bill. But the association is responsible for it because they want to control the install and make sure it's done correctly. So who is at fault? I'm assuming the question is, well, if the third floor replaces their windows and they do it badly and the water drains down the second floor and the first floor, who's responsible for that? Well, ultimately it'd be the contractor who replaced the third floor windows that caused the leaks. Now, can we get a hold of that contractor because that resident moved out, or that flipper did their own windows and they did it really sloppily? They weren't licensed to begin with. So those are kind of questions that you as a board or association need to wrestle with. Anything else, Jim?
No, I know how I prefer it. And
How do you prefer it?
if my favorite sports team loses and I throw my remote and I break the glass, I should be responsible for that glass. But I would like that frame to be part of the building envelope component so I can make sure those things are all tied in together well.
So you didn't throw your remote in your wife's office, did you? Because you broke.
And it was the frame that was broken.
Okay. Last question, how long should the windows be out during replacement? How long will the window be out during replacement? Okay, here's what happens. Your old window is sitting there, the siding's already been removed, the new window is brought up the scaffolding, it's leaned against the side of the building. The installers pop the old window out, do the 9 steps on our drawings or whatever they are, slide the new window in. It's literally an hour or two, but it is never overnight. You're never left without windows in your unit. And so it can be sequenced. And so we don't have a piece of plywood nailed on, that kind of thing. So it's in and out, and good contractors will even plasticate the interior if it's windy, so we don't have dust and blowing into your unit. So it's fairly quick. All right. So then on to the live Q&A. Those of you who attend live get the chance to ask the questions. Okay. So the first question, what are your thoughts on windows being the owner's responsibility over the HOA? Our board informed me recently the windows are my responsibility, but they are responsible for the connecting parts. So we kind of covered some of that. Think of it like glass, because I can take out that IGU. And so I can replace the glass if it fogs up or breaks or Jim throws the remote at it. And so that one we can do the glass. If it's the frame, we really want to, the HOA should probably be responsible for nailing things to the building or attaching them to the building. Next question, how long does testing take? And testing takes, oh boy. Jim, you want to answer this one?
Yeah. So testing for one window takes half of a day, whereas testing for 3 windows will take the whole day. It has to do with the setup and getting everything ready to go. And then once you're set up, it's a lot easier and more streamlined to go through. So try and get the team to test a minimum of 3 windows or a maximum of 3 windows a day.
Yeah. Okay. Next question, can you coordinate the rebate for the board as part of your services? Yes, 100%. And it's like any government form. It's kind of a pain in the neck the first 5 times you do it. But after you get a template going and after you know what you're looking for and adding up, we can get that done for you. But yeah, the people who do it for the first time are pulling their hair out. So we can totally coordinate that.
And it's ultimately evaluating to make sure that you would qualify. So you have to have some existing conditions, and then with your replacements, the betterment, if you will, does that meet a certain threshold? So initial evaluation, and then yes.
Yep. Okay. And then next question, what is WRB? My bad. Using, what do you call those abbreviations? So WRB is weather resistive barrier. That is your building's raincoat. That is your building's building paper, your Tyvek, your black building paper. That's really shedding the water. And so it's under your cladding. Your cladding is actually protecting the WRB. The cladding sheds a lot of water, but water gets through your cladding and gets to the WRB, and then that should drain effectively out. And it's a combination of Tyvek, the tape, the sealants, the flashings, all that stuff. And in today's episode, your window is integrated into your WRB. It should be sealed together like trying to peel apart a grilled cheese sandwich. It just doesn't come apart. And so we really want it weather tight in your WRB. Last question, is testing for skylights the same? It is slightly different, but it is very similar. We can use the same calibrated testing measures. We pay attention to the curb. Your skylight sits over a curb, and so there are different ASTMs for that. But then it's a function of some skylights are a series of panels and others are one unit. And so we can get leaks obviously through all those joints. Okay, that is the last question. Any other questions? Dun, 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 dun. Okay, I do not know what the giveaway is. Maybe Brooke or Carolyn, the producers, can unmute and tell us what's in our giveaway box.
It's a surprise.
It's a surprise. All right. Okay, Jim, pick a number between 1 and 13. And the lucky person, you are identified by the order you signed into your webinar today. And Brooke and Carolyn know that. So if you're the lucky number, they will reach out to you and get your address and send you a surprise.
Okay, I'm going to go all the way back to playing soccer days. I'm going to go with number 11.
Number 11. Okay. Jersey number, favorite number. Is that the score in a game?
Oh, it was my jersey number. Yeah.
Right on. Lucky 11. 11 wins the thing. Okay. Did you know we have free resources for boards and managers? Of course you did. You're watching one of them, the Building Doctor Show. This is a monthly program, but you can also scan the QR code and see over 300 videos on YouTube. Follow our social media. Not only is it funny, it's entertaining as well. And we talk a lot about this stuff here. We also have a monthly newsletter. We've got so much stuff that organizations that in our industry are reaching out to us to help us spread the news. And you can stream, shoot us up on any kind of podcast you listen to. Here's the variety of colors and logos. And remember to like and subscribe. And are you painfully eager to get this webinar over? No, I'm joking. Thank you so much, Jim, for being today's guest and talking to us about windows. Any closing comments you would have?
Thank you all for having me. Education is free, so use those resources and reach out and let us give you some free advice. Want to make sure our experience is shared with everybody that's listening today. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.